soon as I become president, we will start withdrawing within 60 days. We will move as carefully and responsibly as we can, 1 to 2 brigades a month, I believe, and we'll have nearly all the troops out by the end of the year, I hope.
I think I've actually, among the three of us, been the most aggressive and said that I will have all combat troops out in the first year that I'm President of the United States. I will end combat missions, and while I'm President, there will be no permanent military bases in Iraq.
In September, we were in New Hampshire together, and I asked the three of you if you would pledge to have all troops out of Iraq by the end of your first term. All three of you said, we will not take that pledge. I'm hearing something much different tonight.
There's nothing different.
No, there's nothing different, Tim. I want to make sure to clarify. No. I think this is important because it was reported as if we were suggesting that we would continue a war until 2013. Your question was, could I guarantee all troops would be out of Iraq? I have been very specific in saying that we will not have permanent bases there. I will end the war as we understand it in combat missions, but that we are going to have to protect our embassy. We're going to have to protect our civilians who are engaged in humanitarian activity there. We are going to have some presence that allows us to strike if Al-Qaeda is creating bases inside of Iraq. And so I cannot guarantee that we're not going to have a strategic interest that I have to carry out as Commander-in-Chief to maintain some troop presence there, but it is not going to be engaged in war, and it will not be the sort of permanent bases and permanent military occupation that George Bush seems to be intent on.
And you know, Tim, wait, it's not only George Bush. I just want to add here.
But you both will have a presence.
Well, I think that what Barack said is what John and I also meant at that same time, because obviously we have to be responsible. We have to protect our embassy. We do need to make sure that, you know, our strategic interests are taken care of. But it's not only George Bush. The Republican candidates running for the presidency are saying things that are very much in line with President Bush. You know, Senator McCain said the other day that we might have troops there for 100 years, Barack. I mean, they have an entirely different view than we do about what we need to have happening as soon as we get a Democrat-elected president.
30 seconds for Senator Edwards.
I just want to say, it is dishonest to suggest that you're not going to have troops there to protect the embassy. That's just not the truth. It may be great political theater and political rhetoric, but it's not the truth. There is, however, a difference between us on this issue, and I don't think it's subtle. The difference is I will have all combat troops out in the first year that I'm president, and there will be no further combat missions, and there will be no permanent military bases.
Senator Obama.
I just want to pick up on what John said, because we've had this discussion before. John, are you saying that you're, I don't know if I'm using my question here.
I think you are.
This is your question. I got to be careful.
This is,
instead of phrasing it that way.
No. That sounded like the start of a question.
You're half pregnant.
I think it's important to understand that either you are willing to say that you may go after terrorist bases inside of Iraq if they should form, in which case there would potentially be a combat aspect to that, obviously, or you're not. And you know, if you're not, then that could present some problems in terms of the long-term safety and security of the United States of America. So I just want to make sure that we got that clarification.
I'll be happy to respond. Is that a question?
Yeah, I think we've ruled it a question.
My answer to that is, as long as you keep combat troops in Iraq, you continue the occupation. If you keep military bases in Iraq, you're continuing the occupation. The occupation must end. As respects Al-Qaeda, public enemy number one, they're responsible for about 10% of the violence inside Iraq, according to the reports. I would keep a quick reaction force in Kuwait in case it became necessary. But that is different, Barack, than keeping troops stationed inside. Excuse me, let me finish, please. That is different than keeping troops stationed inside Iraq, because keeping troops stationed inside Iraq, combat troops, and continuing combat missions, whether it's against Al-Qaeda or anyone else, at least from my perspective, is a continuation of the occupation. And I think a continuation of the occupation continues the problem, not just in reality, but in perception that America is occupying the country.
Let me suggest I think there's a distinction without a difference here. If it is appropriate for us to keep that strike force outside of Iraq, then that obviously would be preferable. The point is, at some point, you might have that capacity.
Yes.
And that's the clarification I want to make sure was out.
Having come close to settling that, we're going to take another one of our breaks. When we come back, we'll get to some more domestic issues when we continue live from Las Vegas.
This is a Decision 2008 special. The Democratic presidential candidates debate continues. Here again is Brian Williams.
And we are back live in Las Vegas. We promised going to the break that we would return with a discussion on domestic issues. This is of a type, and just before the break we got on to things military. We're going to start this off with a continuation of the questioning by Tim Russer.
Senator Clinton, I'll start with you. The volunteer army, many believe, disproportionate in terms of poor and minority who participate in our armed forces. There's a federal statute on the books which says that if a college or university does not provide space for military recruiters or provide a ROTC program for its students, it can lose its federal funding. Will you vigorously enforce that statute?
Yes, I will. You know, I think that the young men and women who voluntarily join our all-volunteer military are among the best of our country. I want to do everything I can as president to make sure that they get the resources and the help that they deserve. I want a new 21st century GI Bill of Rights so that our young veterans can get the money to go to college and to buy a home and start a business. And I've worked very hard on the Senate Armed Services Committee to, try to make up for some of the negligence that we've seen from the Bush administration. Tim, the Bush administration sends mixed messages. They want to recruit and retain these young people to serve our country, and then they have the Pentagon trying to take away the signing bonuses when a soldier gets wounded and ends up in the hospital, something that, I'm working with a Republican senator to try to make sure never can happen again. So I think we should recognize that national service of all kinds is honorable and it's essential to the future of our country. I want to expand civilian national service, but I think that everyone should make available an opportunity for a young man or woman to be in ROTC, to be able to join the military, and I'm going to do everything I can to support the men and women in the military and their families.
Of the top 10 rated schools, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Stanford, they do not have ROTC programs on campus, should they?
Well, there are ways they can work out fulfilling that obligation, but they should certainly not do anything that either undermines or disrespects the young men and women who wish to pursue a military career.
Senator Obama, same question. Will you vigorously enforce a statute which says colleges must allow military recruiters on campus and provide ROTC programs?
Yes. One of the striking things as you travel around the country, you go into rural communities and you see how disproportionately they are carrying the load in this war in Iraq as well as Afghanistan. And it is not fair. Now, the volunteer army, I think, is a way for us to maintain excellence. And if we are deploying our military wisely, then a volunteer army is sufficient. Although I would call for an increase in our force structure, particularly around the Army and the Marines, because I think that we've got to put an end to people going on 3, 4, 5 tours of duty, and the strain on families is enormous. I meet them every day. But I think that the obligation to serve exists for everybody. And that's why I've put forward a national service program that is tied to my tuition credit for students who want to go to college. You get $4,000 every year to help you go to college. In return, you have to engage in some form of national service. Military service has to be an option. We have to have civilian options as well, not just the Peace Corps, but one of the things that we need desperately are people who are in our foreign service, who are speaking foreign languages, can be more effective in a lot of the work that's going to be required that may not be hand-to-hand combat, but is going to be just as critical in ensuring our long-term safety and security.
This statute's been on the book for